Yeah, good morning to one and all. This is Naveen Kumar Sriramoji. We are into the part 4 of Python tutorial. So in this class, what we'll do is we will be talking about the concept of identifiers, and this is the topic which is said to be the most important topic. Why? Because when we are trying to develop the code, so we will be using different types of, the topic is identifiers in Python, right? So when we are trying to develop the code, then we will be using the concept of variables, concept of functions. We will be using the concept of variables, right? Concept of functions, right? We'll be using the concept of class, right? We'll be using the concept of module, right? Or any other object. So in Python, we'll be using different types of things I have listed here in the screen. Like we will be using the declaration of variables, we will be using the concept of functions, we will be creating an object, we will be creating a class, we will be creating a module, right? So now what we can do here is, when we are trying to declare a variable, when we are trying to declare a function, when we are trying to declare a class, when we are trying to declare a module, when we are trying to declare any object, so there are certain rules to be followed, right, while naming the variable. Suppose I want to give a name to a variable, so you have to follow certain rules. Suppose I want to give the name to a function, we have to follow certain rules. So these are the identifiers we do have in Python. This is very important, but equally important is giving the names in an appropriate manner is also important. So these are called as the rules which we follow while naming the variables, while naming the functions, while naming the class, object or module, are called as the naming space conventions. So we will be listing out what are the rules to be followed while we are declaring the names to this above mentioned list, right? And we will be closing the class. Now the concept is like, we are talking about the naming space conventions, or naming space conventions, or we can say them as the rules for naming the things in the Python. So in this, the first rule to be followed is an identifier. The first rule we follow is an identifier. Identifier is start. Identifier starts with a letter. Letter means it may be A to Z. This is the point number 1 to be noted. Then we will be talking about the second point here. When we are giving name to any of the above mentioned things, we can use underscore. So underscore can also be implemented, can also be used, I can say, can also be used while naming a variable or naming a function or a class or anything. So we can also use, the third point is, you can also use the digits starting from 0 to 9, right? So this is the point number 3 to be noted while the naming variables, right? The first one is every identifier. I have listed the identifiers in the above screen. So identifier should start with the a letter may be A to Z. Underscores can also be used, digits can also be used. Digits means starting from 0 to 9, you can use any of the available digits. And the fourth one is no special symbols are all accepted. No special symbols. No special symbols are accepted. So this is the point number 4 to be considered when you are naming the variables, functions, classes, modules, or objects. Apart from this, you can also have some more rules to be followed, like the naming space conventions is mentioning like we have to follow the case sensitive system in Python. That means the fifth point here we want to understand is Python is case sensitive. Python is case sensitive. That means I'll be giving an example like this. Example is manpower is not equal to manpower. Though the spelling is same, but the first word starts with a capital letter and the second word is not having a capital letter. So both are identified as a different words here, right? So this is the point to be noted. So this is all about the concept of identifiers, right? So there are some more rules to be followed when you are talking about the concept identifiers. So they are like this. Sixth point is whenever you are giving a class name, whenever you are declaring a class name, class name should class name class name should start with an uppercase. This is the point to be noted. So every time you start the name of a class, then it should be the capital letter, right? I'm talking about the next point here. If at all you are starting the name of the identifier with a underscore, then it is said to be a private scope. If we are if we are starting the name of the identifier as with underscore, then the scope will be private. So this is the point to be noted. The eighth point is if at all we are starting a identifier with two underscores, if we are starting an identifier, the name of identifier, the name of the identifier with the two underscores, then the scope is then the scope is strongly private. Strongly private, right? This is the point to be noted. So this is all about the concept of identifiers here. So identifiers are listed as the variables, functions, classes, modules, or objects. And whenever we are using the identifiers, so we have to name the identifiers in order to have the easy identification. And when we are using the naming concept, so there are certain rules to be followed. The first rule is an identifier starts with a letter may be from A to Z. The second one is if at all you want to name anything, name an identifier, you can use underscore also. The third point is you can use digit also for naming an identifier. Fourth point is in the keyboard we have different types of symbols available, but no other symbol other than underscore is accepted to name an identifier. Fifth one is Python is case sensitive. That means the capital letter and small letter are having different meaning when you are implementing the name of an identifier. The sixth point is if we are defining a class name, so it is a mandatory rule that the name of the class should start with an underscore uppercase, right? That means the first letter should be a capital letter in the name of the class. Seventh point is if we start the name of the identifier with underscore, then the scope of the identifier is private. And if we are starting the name of the identifier with two underscore symbols, then the scope of the identifier what we are declaring is strongly private. So this is all about the concept of identifiers. So I will be coming back with a new topic in the next class. So thank you.